hearts and hands, compassionate leadership of all times. We'll have a great learning from Dr. Banerjee sessions today. So before we start, I ask Ranjana to make few announcements and to start the session. Ranjana, please.
Thank you, Mohan sir, for your welcome speech, and Dr. Sujaya Banerjee. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our request. I request all our participants to keep their video and audio on mute, and please do not share anything on the screen. कृपया भिडियो र अडियोलाई चाहिँ म्युटमा राखिदिनु होला र स्क्रिनमा केही पनि सेयर नगर्नु होला। म्याडमको सेसन हामीले 40 मिनट्सको प्लान गरेको छौं र त्यसपछि उहाँले कन्टिन्यू गर्नुहुन्छ भने उहाँले हामीलाई इन्फर्म गर्नुहुन्छ र हामी त्यसपछि पनि कन्टिन्यू गर्छौं। हस्, थ्यांक यू। Dr. Sujaya, yes, please, you can start.
All right. Thank you very much. I hope I can share my screen. You have the opportunity to let me share my screen. Here it is. All right. Is the screen visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Fantastic. Super. Thank you so much. So I want to start by thanking, Mohan Oza of Growth Sellers and Ranjana and team for having invited me. We go back a very long way where we've sort of spoken, but I've spoken at your very outstanding seminars that you organize in Kathmandu. And more recently had the opportunity to visit the Drukpa lineage, the monastery at Kathmandu as well, where I worked with the Kung Fu nuns, and I had an absolutely outstanding experience doing that. Associations and memories with Kathmandu and with Nepal. So I'm delighted to be able to talk to the HR community in Nepal today, and all those who've joined from other parts, including India. Welcome to this presentation, to this conversation, really today. Here's my choreography, which is the organizations that I worked for. I have about 3 decades of experience as a professional in various companies. British Gas, I worked with ADNOC Group, I worked with the SR Group, I worked with Low Lintas and Partners, and I currently lead Capstone People Consulting. This is a 3-year-old startup. I started this about 3 years ago. We work with an incredible list of over 70 organizations, both organizations that are multinationals and Indian organizations. We also do a lot of work around Southeast Asia, particularly out of Singapore, and some degree of work that we typically do out of the UK. So this is a very fast-growing, vibrant startup, very exciting kind of work. We do work largely in the space of leadership and change. We do a lot of work in the space of diversity and inclusion, and a lot of innovations that we've brought in the pedagogies around how people can, how organizations and individuals can drive change, through new skill sets, through mindsets and new perspectives. So this is my choreography. I'm also the author of the book Switch: How 12 Indian Companies Manage Change Successfully. I think with that, I want to move to the theme, the topic of our conversation here today. And I'm mindful we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as I can, and hopefully, invite questions. So please do feel free to be able to use the chat option that is available, and please keep posting your questions. And I'm hoping that we will have 5 or 10 minutes at the end to be able to take some of these questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's undoubtedly incredible, unprecedented times of change. We're living in unbelievable times. We were talking about change and volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous worlds, and I know that a lot of people who had long tenures within organizations or had worked with the same company for long periods of time would come to the same office, to the same colleagues, to the same boss, would scratch their head to say, what has so dramatically changed in our lives? So what indeed is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous? It seems to be business as usual. And I think what's just happened in the last 5 weeks has redefined that. I don't think there's anyone now who's ever going to ask, so what's so turbulent about our lives? So what's so different? What has changed so dramatically? These are unprecedented times. There's nobody who is in the business world or who's currently employed in organizations at leadership levels who has ever experienced a calamity such as this. In fact, when we said VUCA, what we really meant was that there were new waves of growth coming out of globalization, a more competitive environment in which you were doing business, continued market volatility that required organizations to be able to reinvent themselves, and those which didn't remain competitive into the future. We've had a decade where about 30% of companies have dropped out of the Fortune 500 list. So clearly a lot of organizations that were not able to reinvent and remain competitive. The huge amount of employee expectations that have changed. The war for talent, so to speak, still continues. And I have my own view on that, on our narrow perspectives on talent, but nevertheless, most organizations have always believed that they don't really, they're not able to attract the right people or retain the right people. And there are huge challenges in terms of being able to manage these increasing expectations that employees have from their organizations. There's also been an incredible number of shifts that we've seen come out of technology. So we've continuously called technology our biggest disruptor. And undoubtedly it is, because organizations that have not kept pace with this one have had a huge catching up job to do, which often proves to be a huge disadvantage in terms of competitiveness. VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. I don't think we're ever going to ask what this really means or how does this really impact us anymore, because this has become a living reality for every single person in the business world. We're in a situation which is unprecedented. Even when we spoke about complexities, we actually meant different kinds of complexities. When we spoke about volatility, we meant something else. When we spoke about ambiguous and an ambiguous future, we didn't mean what we are in an ever pervasive manner experiencing at this point in time. And I have a snapshot here of the last 10 years, because there have been a huge number of unprecedented events that we've seen. The global financial crisis, we didn't see that coming. The rise of ISIS, the Arab Spring of 2010, mass displacement of people across the Middle East and Europe, Brexit, trials and tribulations of the presidential elections in the United States. And I don't want to start talking about who really won those elections, because that's going to be a masterclass by itself. The US-China trade war, which is, we didn't see that coming. Emerging markets, we're talking about deaccelerating growth, and now we don't know what that growth is going to be. There are all kinds of predictions of doom and gloom around that, but I'm going to leave that be. And of course, 2020, such a defining year, such an unprecedented time. The coronavirus originates from China to become a global pandemic. And this global pandemic has impacted the lives of millions of people, has disrupted the lives of millions of people across the globe. It has infected millions of people. It has caused many people to lose their lives, and it has impacted very severely and adversely global economies. And yet, when we spoke about resilience and adversity and adversity management, and I pulled out a slide that I would often talk about in the context of what it is that organizations will need to do to brace themselves against the vagaries of the future. And invariably, and it's called Trend 9, as you can see, and invariably when I spoke about organization resilience management and about, managing for emergencies or emergency response systems, business continuity plans, and the rest of that, I think especially when we spoke about disaster preparedness, there seemed to be a bit of a glaze in the eyes of a lot of people to say, why is this such a significant trend? Yeah, what disaster should we be bracing ourselves against? Because honestly, at least in India, the adversities or the disaster has typically been around managing floods and managing, at worst fires. I don't think we've ever thought of planning against a pandemic. And I don't want to make a kind of generalization here, but by and large, most organizations found themselves on a back foot on this one. Despite the fact that we already knew of the virus for the last 3 months, for most organizations, there was some wishful thinking that this did not apply to us, or this would not really impact us so severely. I think there's also a tendency to make scant this situation by saying, well, we had SARS earlier and it didn't impact us so badly. So I think there's a tendency to be able to be a little dismissive around being able to manage around disaster, or around the impending challenges of a situation where many other countries before us were already locking down, and somewhere we were hoping against hope that this is not going to be able to impact us adversely. And so whether we like it or not, most organizations find themselves on a back foot in mobilizing large numbers of people to work from home, asking their managers to be able to use new methods, new approaches, and to begin with, to start using technology to be able to manage virtual teams impactfully. And so this is what we had, right? We've shut offices, work from home, travel ban. It took a pandemic for India Inc. and many countries, including, I'm sure you have the similar experience, for companies to start thinking about, can you actually start working from home? Is it possible to work from home? We've been talking ever since the advent of the internet, there's been the option of being able to work from home. But the truth is that we're so trapped in industrial era styles of being able to lead and manage people that most of us didn't quite believe you can actually motivate or keep people engaged and interested to be able to, more importantly, productive if they weren't physically present in the workplace. In fact, that has been a large reason why not having an intrinsically motivated, believing that you don't have an intrinsically motivated workforce has been very significantly in the way of being able to even offer flexibilities to different segments of talent. And here is what we have, a calamity within a calamity, or should I say this calamity is even bigger than the calamity, which is that we're already looking at job losses. In fact, in India Inc., there is, besides absolutely, terrible stories of doom and gloom around impending job losses, announced job losses, salary cuts, and so on. We're in a situation where there is a risk of being able to lose 136 million jobs post the Corona India. So, and this has been a situation across the globe, but been very severe. And what really pains me is the speed at which organizations went around using what was seen as perhaps the low-hanging fruit for reducing cost, which is to be able to not only have people to struggle with the pandemic, but to now have to deal with job loss. But I'm not here to talk only about the impact that the current corona crisis, or the COVID-19 crisis, has created in the lives of people. There's fear, anxiety. There is fear, anxiety related to the health of themselves and families. People are learning how to work at home remotely without having their co-workers and teams around. A lot of the managers do not know how it is that they're going to be able to get teams to work using technology and virtual platforms. You hear alarming stories of managers asking people to remain logged in the whole day just so that they know they're working, right down to asking them to be able to check in 4 times or 6 times during the day to be able to make sure that people are working, and to kind of get obsessive about the fact that they're losing control and losing the ability to be able to manage productivity, as the belief is that the teams will slacken, that they will be demotivated, would not be interested in producing. In fact, there are alarming stories. I run a forum called the Learning and OD Roundtable, and we get access to a lot of members who come in with their dilemmas and challenges. And we've also created something called the LNOD Roundtable HR response team that is offering pro bono HR services to organizations that have dilemmas to do with people-related challenges. And I invite you through this webinar to be able to reach us and our HR response team, because you have an absolutely fabulous list of experts there to be able to support you with your dilemmas and questions. And this service is available absolutely pro bono through the lockdown. But ladies and gentlemen, our world has changed, and how? Uh, I'm going to focus in this conversation around what does employee engagement really mean in times of adversity? What does it really mean to be able to continue engaging people? One of the biggest challenges that managers and leaders are having in the context of managing virtual teams. I must say that the organizations that were already working with some virtual teams that were geographically dispersed have had a huge advantage over organizations that they have never learned to work virtually. So this is a very interesting time. Everyone going up a learning curve, and I decided to be able to focus on this theme because it's so opportune and timely. I want to, in the context of engagement, take you back to a study that was conducted in 1924. Many of you on the line would already know of the Hawthorne study. This was done by Elton Mayo and his team of sociologists, where they studied the effect of working conditions on the productivity of individuals. This was done way back in 1924, and they continued these experiments right through into 1932. And here's what they found. While they found that working conditions, when you change working conditions around people, it does in fact impact productivity adversely or positively. The real fallout of this entire experiment was that they found that initially the experiment group would react or respond to the changes, and beyond a point they didn't. And there was something miraculous happening there as they continued to work despite certain adversities around them, and their performance kept improving steadily. And it led the group of sociologists to be able to land into an integral insight of being able to manage people at work, which is that when people know they're being observed, or when they know what they produce counts for people around them, there is an intrinsic motivation to be able to do well and to perform better. And this is quite contrary to being a nag or being after people, but to simply show people that you're interested in what it is that they actually deliver. And I've called it the Hawthorne effect in the context of the modern workplace, which is Are we interested and engaged and involved in what it is that our teams produce every day? Not in an obsessive manner, not in a negative manner, not in a not in a vigilance kind of style, but more in terms of being able to be there to take out the encumbrances and take out the challenges that they might have as they're actually delivering through execution. Do we have the right people on board to begin with? Because having the right people on board doing the right job can play a very significant role in terms of productivity. Inclusive leadership, do we know whom to include and how to not enable people to feel excluded, especially out of important conversations? The details ever so important and listening is ever so important. I'm going to call all of that the Hawthorne effect. And now I want to be able to, in the context of being able to, having set the context that people typically perform better or contribute better when they have managers who are involved and interested in what it is that they're performing or what they're delivering. I'm going to go down to being able to redefine for all of us what is employee engagement. And the reason I'm doing this is because through my career, and particularly through the last 3 years as a consultant, I've been often dismayed at how loosely the word engagement gets used. So engagement gets used as a word to be able to identify something that's entertaining, something that's interesting, something that's joyful. And while engagement can be all of this, when we talk about employee engagement, we're actually talking about the extent to which people feel passionately about their jobs. Yeah, it has lesser to do with whether you have great executive food available within your organization, or whether you have Zumba classes, or whether you have I've seen some videos being put up saying, hey, you're our senior managers dancing to some music together. And all this has caused an increase of productivity within our organization. So I want to be able to, sort of bust some of these theories, and also the fact that just because we celebrate people's birthdays, or we send them birthday cards, or we have samosa and parties, or we have after work, beer parties, those are all fun and joy socialization platforms. And are they important within a workplace? They most certainly are, but they're not employee engagement interventions. Employee engagement is centered in the relationship and the touchy-feely interactions between a manager and his immediate employees, the employees that he actually works with. The manager is poised in a place that's called occupational intimacy, which means that the manager is best poised to be able to influence the intrinsic motivation of people around them. Why do we want or seek employee engagement within organizations? So that we can get people to feel passionately about work, so that we're able to influence their relationship with work, and we're able to get them to be able to put in discretionary contribution. Now, discretionary contribution is a great vocabulary to take back from this conversation here. It means the ability to want to give more than what may have been asked for. It's the ability to stretch, to be in the flow, to just enjoy what it is that you're really doing, so that you're able to contribute far beyond what the organization may have expected. It's actually a combination of contributing through your head, which is when you feel mentally engaged, through your heart, when you feel emotionally engaged with what's happening with the organization, and also through the hands, which is you're engaged in doing, contributing through work. So let's try and look at what that really means. We're looking at discretionary contribution. It is the meeting point, the intersection between head, heart, and hand, which means that I don't just get intellectually, sort of stimulated. It's not just that I feel, kindly, or I feel emotionally about the organization and the work that I do here, but all of that contributes into what I do with my hands, which is to do everything that I can to be able to stretch. Do we know our people? Do we know our people is the first question I'm going to start with, which is how do you cause engagement? It's ever so important that we're doing this. Is there somebody who wants to speak?
Ma'am, I have put them in a mute, so
Okay, all right. Okay,
maybe they
all
can
right.
answer
Okay, no,
in
I
a
can just see
chat.
some. Yeah. Yes, sure. Yeah. All right. So we continue. I'm going to
Yes.
start right at the start, which is, do we know the people that we lead? And I don't mean what's on their CV. And I must say that it is quite an apology, because a lot of people don't even know what's on the CV of the people they lead. But I mean this more in the context of, do we really know them in terms of what are their aspirations, what were their failures? Do they know you in terms of your aspiration, your failures? What did you want most in life? What has been your life journey? This kind of disclosure can very significantly impact trust within teams. So I'm going to start by getting you to ask yourself the question, do you truly know the people that you lead? Because that's going to play such an important role, especially in the context of being able to now engage teams remotely. I want to be able to talk about an important concept called the progress principle. And progress principle sits squarely with the Hawthorne Studies insights, which is, do you know what it is that people are contributing every day? What that really means is, do we know of their setbacks? Do we know what support they need? Do we know which encumbrances need to be removed from their execution? Do we try and minimize the negative around their work? Do we understand, most importantly, their inner work life? And I want to be able to spend a couple of seconds here to be able to talk about not just what's happening on the outer surface, but what's really going on inside. What I mean by that is, what is the sense making that people have every day of their work, of themselves, of their teams, and the organization? How do they manage their emotions? So for example, when somebody contributes and their idea gets accepted, there is a feeling, there is an emotion they experience. If they didn't get invited to a meeting, there is an emotion they experience. If you have not communicated with them through the day, or you don't care what it is that they've produced, there is an emotion they experience. If they sent you an email which is sitting in your inbox and you haven't bothered to respond to that, there is an emotion they experience. So are we in touch with these emotions that people experience? And as a result, understand that the perceptions and emotions are converting into their morale and motivation to contribute every day. So what is the inner working life? And that's point number 2 that I want you to take back from this conversation. What is the inner working life of our people? I next want to talk about connectedness. And I'm going to talk about connectedness in the context of the effort we make to let people know what they do every day and how that contributes to a larger picture within the organization. And what I mean by that is, are we aware of what we ask people to do and how that connects back to the larger strategy or the goal of the organization? And who's supposed to be maintaining this connectedness if not the immediate manager? One of the challenges we have with not being able to get discretionary contributions is when people don't understand what they do every day and how it is that that connects back to something larger that the organization may be trying to achieve. Particularly in times of crisis like the current lockdown, it may be ever so important to let people know, through this feeling of isolation, through feeling not as motivated to be able to work because they're missing the co-worker experience, or they're simply not used to working by using technology. I mean, this can be a very lonely experience for a lot of people. And remember that we're actually all part of a collective society. It's not difficult to be able to understand that we like, associations, we like meetings, we like interacting with people. A very significant part of our workday is about being able to enjoy the co-workers who are around us and interacting with them, whether for work or otherwise. And everyone's missing that experience right now. So it's easy to feel isolated is the point I'm making. And especially if the manager is not making the effort to create connectedness between what it is that he's asking people to do and how that's adding back to something that the organization is struggling with or is trying to achieve, particularly in a difficult time. So I'm going to leave this as the third point, employee connectedness, which is ever so important. I also want to talk about engagement in the context of intentionality. Oftentimes a lot of us have, good intentionality. We intend that we want to do it, we want to achieve this, we want to be able to achieve this goal, but we often don't know how. And so we're not getting performance. And if you're not getting performance and productivity, it's often because we've not explained the method, which is how. Leader as coach is such a significant part of getting performance at this time. If we don't believe in leader as teacher, it's oftentimes going to be very, very difficult. And I want people on this webinar to be able to reflect, especially if you're struggling with productivity at this time, whether we're doing enough to coach the people who are not being able to perform on their own. And I've got a nice quote here: leader is someone who will take you to places you will not go to on your own. And the current times, like I said at the start of the webinar, these are times of, where people feel fragile, they feel unsure, there is fear, there's anxiety. And how can we, in these times, use coaching as a very significant mechanism to be able to get people to learn, upskill, learn new skills, and learn to interpret what's going on and the environment in a different way? Open and transparent communication. I must mention here that I have heard alarming stories around this, including, through the work that we're doing with some of the members of the Learning and OD Roundtable who've come forth asking us for support and help. It is pretty alarming to be able to see The fact that we, oftentimes people have used the platforms, leaders have used the platforms for town halls and what have you over the last 5 weeks to call out doom and gloom, to be able to start perhaps mentally preparing people for the worst. Instead of being able to show a ray of hope or light at the end of the dark tunnel, there is, a tendency to not address real concerns and instead, talk about how it is that the business is suffering and that the business may not survive, that this is a long haul for over a year and so on. And while I know that leaders need to strike this balance between realism and optimism, these are times where we can err on the side of not foolish optimism, but optimism so that pessimism does not take over and we do not have the energy and the motivation of our people. So how to manage communication at this time, crisis communication, is going to be ever so important, particularly in these very trying times. So how do we remain engaged and productive, especially in the context of remote teams? And here I want to be able to just pause to be able to let you know that, cast a reflection around how do people in the armed forces manage remote teams, because they largely manage remote teams. And if you want to draw analogies, the different groups of people who typically by default work and manage and engage with remote teams. So I wanted to be able to reflect on the fact that it's not impossible to be able to get this done. It's eminently possible to be able to have highly engaged teams working remotely and remaining productive. What can you remember to do? And I think that some of this is a very large part of this is very significantly dependent on the leader's own clarity to be able to get the job done. So to what extent all of these times are a test on our own clarity, which is, do we understand what it is that we're trying to achieve and what it is that we want to get done? Are we able to break this down into how to get this done and to be able to make sure that we manage timelines and maintain, like I said, high levels of intentionality around the job, which is get people to take you seriously, but there's no slackening that is happening through the remote working. Very important to be mindful and inclusive so that people are not demotivated. Whoever are the right people who should be on the right calls, please make sure they're there. Record the meetings. Make sure that you're following through. Make sure there are things to do lists that you're managing. People are managing for themselves. Bring the team together as often as possible. It's absolutely important to be able to have fun meetings. You can have, working lunches where everybody just brings in their lunch and talks together. You can have working coffee breaks. Following through is ever so important. Communicating, just ever so important. For remote working, I want you to be able to remember these 4 important blocks: tools, rules, norms, culture. Have we provided people with simple tools to be able to get the job done? Does everyone know how to use it, especially the leader? Rules. What are the rules of working together? I know of organizations that have mobilized thousands of people and there's no work from home agreement that people have signed. Please be careful about your data and managing the security of data as you're transitioning and mobilizing people. It's important to be able to have rules on how it is that they're going to work together. Norms, accountability. Yep. Consequence for no action. What happens if they don't do what you're asking them to do? And build a culture of trust. So tools, rules, norms, culture, very important. I have a last set of like a combination of most of what I took you through during the course of this conversation that I want to be able to recap for you with questions so that you're able to reflect on each part of these in terms of what I said. The progress principle, which is keeping track of what it is that people are doing, removing encumbrances from there for them. Here are the questions you should be asking yourself so that you know you're managing the progress principle well. How are teams progressing on the tasks assigned? Do we know the stumbling blocks to their execution? Are we doing enough in a timely manner to remove them? Are we investing in the inner work life of our people? Are we sensitive to the inner work life of our people? And how are we treating people, team versus individual? And we got to be able to strike this good balance where sometimes it's the team and oftentimes your check-ins are for individuals. Connectedness, which is getting people to understand what I do every day and how that adds up to what the organization is trying to achieve. Do our teams understand what they contribute and how that fits into the overall picture? Do they understand where their contribution fits in? When they achieve, do they believe they did it? Do we have a mechanism to celebrate and praise good work achieved, even if these are small wins? Honest, transparent communications. What are the questions to ponder over? Do we have the gumption to share difficult news or discordant information and be transparent about that, especially about management decisions, that have already been made and take the effort to explain them to teams. I know of an organization that recently lost its head of HR through the lockdown. And all the other HR heads have been telling their teams, don't even talk about this to anyone, and no questions around the exit of the senior HR person is going to be entertained on this call. So blocking people off and not taking on important questions is a terrible way to be able to build trust with teams. Do we communicate enough, frequently, but not intrusively? Do we use communication to connect and engage? Do we level, give feedback, and communicate with candor? This is so important to build trust. Do not stop giving people feedback if they're not working or they've slackened or they're not delivering during the lockdown. Very important, because finally those who communicate with the teams with candor are the ones who are best poised to be able to build trust. Do we use our social skills to enable collaboration across teams? What I mean here is the leader has the onus of being able to collaborate across teams through the lockdown and get the work done. So you're sitting very well poised to become a very significant role model on how it is that you can communicate across teams to be able to get the job done. Clarity, capability, confidence questions to be able to ponder on. Are we using this time to raise the bar on immense possibilities with performance? Or have we decided to contain ourselves and settle to do the bare minimum that we need to do to be able to survive? Are we using this time to build mindsets and skill sets that will help the teams to be able to deal with the new usual that will come up in the future? Are we using this time to build confidence in teams on the immense possibilities and new opportunities that these crisis times are going to provide in the future? Are we role modeling that positivity? So have we settled, or are we ourselves on an overdrive to be able to use this adversity well? There's a beautiful quotation: sweet are the uses of adversity, not the adversity its uses. So do we have the ability to use adversity well and demonstrate that, role model that? Are we using this time for creative work and for leveraging opportunities for innovation? These are incredible times to start doing things differently and to be able to revisit the way in which we've been doing things in the past. Here are the trust questions to be able to ponder on. Are we open to showing our vulnerability on challenges that we're experiencing for which we do not have immediate solutions? So do we have, as leaders, the ability to let people know, well, I can see that's a pain point, but we'll figure that out as we go? Do we have the ability to deal with team queries with candor, with transparency and openness, even if this does not allow us to be able to? Yes.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you in between, but the time remaining is very limited, like 2 minutes something second. Do you want to continue with the session? We can ask everybody to re-log in after 2 minutes. Immediately after this session will be cut down, and they can re-log in.
Everybody can. Yes.
Because there are so many questions also coming up
so
for you to answer.
Trust questions when they re-log in. Yes. Okay. So we'll take a 2-minute break and log in back then. Is it the same details to log in?
Yes, ma'am. Same details. Same details.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Lovely. So we can leave the meeting and join in again. Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
सबैजनालाई रिक्वेस्ट गर्छु 2 मिनट पछि फेरि रिलगिन गर्नु होला टाइम सिट दिन लागेको थियो त्यही भएर हामीले यो सेसनलाई बीचमा इन्टरप्ट गर्यौ होप सबैजनाले फेरि रिलगिन गर्नुहुन्छ होला सबैजनालाई म रिक्वेस्ट गर्छु 2 मिनट पछि फेरि रिलगिन गर्नु होला सेम आईडी र पासवर्डबाट